Hi, I'm Alex Howard, and welcome to this week's episode of In Therapy, where we follow real people on their therapeutic journeys. Welcome also to the first episode of 2022. We are super excited for some of the plans we have for In Therapy this year. In this week's episode, we're catching up with Al, and we're talking about how if we want the circumstances of our life to be different, we have to be different. If we want things to change, we have to change. And often that's the real challenge. And I thought this was the perfect episode to begin the new year with. If you struggle with self-discipline or motivation, hopefully there'll be some real gems in here for you. If you haven't already, please do like, subscribe, click the bell icon. You'll be notified as new episodes are released. And do follow my Instagram at Alex Howard Therapy for daily inspiration and support. 41-year-old Al has come to In Therapy to work on a range of issues, predominantly health anxiety. In his last session, Al and I discussed the effects of background anxiety, how his coping strategies are actually making his anxiety worse, and how meditation can help calm his overall system. Well, Al, it's great to see you.
You too.
How have you been doing? It's a few weeks since I last saw you.
Yeah. Yes, been a mixed bag. So I was doing pretty well the first few days after I saw you with the thought diary. I was keeping that. That fell off. I did listen to the second module, so I got through that, and I did some days where I meditated. But again, that fell off. It's been a challenging couple of weeks for many reasons. I had a lot of work on. I've been continuing to suffer with this reflux that I've been having.
Have you started the medication? Because you were picking medication up last time.
Yeah. So I'm 2 weeks into that now. It doesn't particularly seem to be helping, but you're supposed to take it for a month. So
yeah,
okay. Going to do that. And then I was away this last weekend, which was for fun, and that was great, but it was sort of tiring, and I didn't really have time to myself to do anything.
When was so you managed to do it for a few days? When were those few days, and when was it that you did it up until you went away, or you sort of lost momentum and then went away?
Well, I did the thought diary, I think, straight away for maybe 3 or 4 nights.
Okay, that
dropped off. And then I did some meditation 2 or 3 days in a row, probably about the time the thought diary maybe dropped off.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, it was sort of maybe a bit back to back.
Yeah.
Rather than both happening at the same time.
Yeah. So that brings us up till kind of early last week or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And that dropping off, what? Because I know that's something you talked about before, that you can start things a little bit, but then you struggle with momentum around it. What happened?
I think I remember feeling with the thought diary that I don't know. I found it hard to I found it hard to be specific, because I know that's probably what it's about, is to notice specific examples of these behaviors and to note them down. Whereas often what I feel goes on with me is it's like a more generalized underlying state of mind and emotion that doesn't result in a lot of specific action. So I found the sort of trying to catalog that it felt a bit pointless. It felt like I'm just writing the same thing every day, which is that I've just got this underlying generalized worry about this symptom. I'm not necessarily doing much differently because of it.
Well, let's come back to that in a little bit, because I think that will be helpful to zoom in a little bit more on. Then you watched the module and you started doing the meditation.
Yeah.
What happened there?
I really enjoyed that, actually, because I did it at night, not long before I went to bed, and I found it very relaxing. So that wasn't, I think I stopped doing that more purely for logistical reasons rather than any kind of not wanting to. Or
So you initially felt some shift in terms of doing it.
I don't know about a shift, but I certainly.
I know it's been a shift in life, but I mean, you did it,
Yeah.
and when you finished, you felt more relaxed at the start.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, like a momentary shift more than
Definitely. Yeah.
When you say logistical things, so just run me through what happened. And by the way, this is not meaning. I don't mean this is like the Spanish Inquisition. I really am curious and want to understand, because if we can figure out what causes momentum to go and try and put some things in place to move through that, that's how, because the change is not you and me sat here talking about things. The change is what happens outside of this conversation. So it is an important piece for us to understand, but it's not about judgment or shaming, because we all do this in our own ways, but it's really about understanding how it happens.
Yeah. So I think maybe it's that if I'm doing something, so I'm working all day and then I do something in the evening, and let's say it's quite late before I get any time to myself to sort of just decompress and sit down. I kind of like, the last thing I then want to do is another task.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And even though I sort of enjoyed the meditation, it's certainly still in my head as a bit of a task. And
it's an effort to start. I think that's how I put it. It's
an effort to start. It's also, and I know that it sounds ridiculous, but it's 15 minutes of, I could be watching something I want to catch up on. It's not as much as it's relaxing. It's not a leisure activity. Right. Exactly. And so I think, an obvious way around that would be to build that time maybe into the morning instead. But then I hate mornings. So I'm like, I just, in the mornings, I'm kind of like 99% of the time, I say get up rather than wake up, because I'm just always awake already. I get up feeling exhausted, and I normally leave that until the last possible moment. And then there's only enough time to shower, eat breakfast before I have to start working. Yeah. So, and I know all of that is really unhealthy and bad habit, and I'm my own worst enemy and all of that. But that's the honest sort of.
Yeah, no, that's what we're here to talk about. Yeah. What sort of time do you normally go to sleep? What time do you wake, and what time do you get up?
So this is another issue for me in the situation I'm living in, which is my housemate and I keep quite different hours. And if I had my way, I would be, switching everything in the flat off at 10, and being in my room, decompressing, writing my diary, reading, and turn my phone off, and with the aim to turn the light out at 11. But, if we're both home, she'll watch, not always, but like there'll be a night where I just want to get my head down. I want to have quiet. I want to, but she'll be in the living room watching TV right up until 11, which is the time we've sort of compromised on switching things off in the communal area, because it's right outside my bedroom. And it's like it's in my room. But even that is like, it kind of disrupts me. And I think this is a nervous system thing, because I get stressed about, because in my head, I'm like, I just know she's going to be watching it till 11, because that's what we agreed. And she wants to push it right up until that, what we'd agreed. Like, and it becomes this source of like anger for me. And it's not like, and I totally understand it from her point of view. Why should, it's her house too, and she doesn't have these issues. Why shouldn't she be able to enjoy the living space until a reasonable hour, which is what it is. It's a reasonable hour, But for me, it's like, for fuck's sake, I just want to, I want to have the control to be able to go to bed when I want to go to bed and have peace when I want peace. I'm 41. Why can't I have that, So it's just, I think I've realized in the last couple of weeks, the next place I do need to live alone. So I think I need to kind of set things in motion to kind of make that happen. And until then, it's going to be a challenge, and I'm just going to have to I just won't be able to sort of have the control over my environment to the point where I'm able to keep the schedule I would like to keep.
And have you tried things like noise cancelling headphones or
yeah, I've got those. But it's like, and again, this speaks to how jacked up my nervous system is. It's just like, even if I'm sat there with them on, the knowledge that she's out there, like, because I that knowledge that I know when I take them off, I'll hear that noise again. It won't be peace and quiet, which is what I just want, Does that make sense? It's like,
it does,
and it creates this internal
No, it does make sense. But I think what it is it's indicative exactly of what you're saying of a jacked up nervous system. Because the more we're in a stress response, the more attuned we are and the more reactive we are to the environment around us. The calmer we are internally, the less we are reacting to it's like,
of course,
the more cortisol, the more adrenaline, the more it's like we're looking for danger and something happens and we go into that.
Yeah.
So from the perspective of being wired in your nervous system, you need the environment to be the way you want it to be in a calm, healing state. Therefore, the only resolution is to move and be by yourself. I would offer that if we are successful in training your system to be calmer, it may be that you have a very different response to having that, that's not to say that you're going to become tolerant of anything that's going on, but it's like right now, your comfort zone of tolerance is very narrow.
Yeah.
And I think the calmer your system becomes, the more that comfort zone then starts to expand and starts to grow.
Yeah.
So it goes back to, a key part of our focus together is how do we reset and calm your system? As we talk about it, I think it's very clear how important that actually is. But then we go back to losing the momentum in terms of and it's not that you did meditation and suddenly, you started speaking in tongues and the whole world transformed for you in that moment, but you noticed there was a calming that happened that was momentary, and it wouldn't necessarily have lasted that long initially, but there was a calming.
Yeah.
The way that tends to work is if that's kind of where your system is now, you meditate, you calm down, you stop, and it goes back again. And you have to do that enough times that over time, you're training a new baseline. It's like all the systems in your body have a homeostatic balance. So your blood sugar, your blood pressure, your blood temperature. And if these things go out of balance, your body works very hard to bring them back into balance. Right now, you have what I call a maladaptive stress response. You have normalized to a high state of stress. And when your system comes back to balance, it thinks that's the balance.
Yeah.
So this is where you are. You might work to calm your system down. Yeah. You stop, your system goes, now hang on, that's normal. So it goes back to what it's got used to doing. So no one meditation or no one moment of insight resets that kind of conditioned response that's there. But over time, what you're working to do is to retrain your system, to teach your system to have a calmer foundation.
Yeah.
So going back to, you're aiming to put your light out around 11. How often does that happen, and how long does it take you to get sleep?
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. And it feels to me like part of the reason for that is this angst around, like you say, it's like I am actively looking out for danger. Yeah. It's like I'm looking out for that noise to happen and to disturb me. And so I'm sort of, even on the way back home, I start being in this state of slightly on edge.
Yeah.
It's just horrible. So it's like, and I could completely agree that the goal for me would be to calm that to the point where I could deal with the fact that I could deal with there being some noise.
Yeah.
Not, like you said, not anything. Because even if I live alone, I might have neighbors. So it's not.
And also,
I know that.
And also, as we talked about last time, there are pros and cons to living alone. Because if you live alone, you also haven't got that kind of emotional contact and support of someone being around. So, I'm agnostic to whether you move or not, or live with someone else, or live by yourself. But there is a pattern, certainly over the last kind of year or so, particularly because of the tinnitus, of this sort of constant moving to try and find the right environment. And some of those environments sounds like they've just genuinely not been the right environment. And other times they've been suboptimal, but potentially workable if you weren't responding the way that you have been in your system.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like I've really, in a way I've really kicked myself, because certainly the first place I moved to after the first of the many places I moved to was just a gorgeous place.
I remember you said that last time.
Oh, it was just, and I really like, and I'm still good friends with the housemate I was living. And I'm still actually friends with everyone I lived with throughout the year. So it's like,
I mean, it's quite a good way of making friends.
Yeah, I mean, I had this one gig. We had this gig. It was a couple of gigs back, but I think there was someone from every single house I had passed through in that year, which was lovely.
I mean, that is really sweet.
Yeah, it was like,
if you ever need confirmation that you're a nice person, it shows that you are.
Yeah. And that was a sort of really nice sort of silver lining of the situation. But at the same time, it's like, fuck's sake, why couldn't I have just, been okay living in one of these places?
Yeah, but I think that's the point, that if we are dependent upon the environment around us to be exactly the way we need it to be, it rarely is it that
it's
way.
Not viable,
right? And particularly if you, in time, get married and decide to have kids or whatever, it's like you actually end up with less control over your environment, not more, in many ways. Yeah. And I think the important thing is what you can learn to influence is your internal environment, and if you learn to influence that. As I say, it doesn't mean you're tolerant of any external environment, but certainly that kind of comfort zone can definitely expand and grow. But just to go, because I want to understand the detail a bit more, going back to so you don't often get sleep at 11 o'clock, but that's the intention. What's the average time?
I'd say it's more often closer to midnight.
Yeah.
And then waking up or getting up rather. I mean, so in the last couple of weeks, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but I developed a pattern of waking up around 6:45, 7. Normally to go to the loo. It's one of those chicken and egg things where I don't know if I woke up because I needed the loo or I woke up and noticed I needed the loo.
Yeah.
But whichever, it's like I couldn't get back to sleep.
Right.
So often, I'd be turning the lights out close to midnight, but taking a while to get to sleep, and then waking up at 6:45, 7.
So you're ending up with about 6 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Which is probably an hour and a half less than you need.
Right. Yeah, 6 hours of, and also not very good quality, not deep sleep. So So just, but that, I mean, I've certainly, I can sort of feel the fact that my body's become used to being permanently sleep deprived. And like you say, the nervous system as well. I can I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
Because I carry on functioning.
Yeah.
I haven't had a nervous breakdown, or I haven't collapsed, I haven't stopped.
Yeah, but often what happens when we become drained and fatigued in that way is we become more emotionally numb. So we just don't feel the kind of the rainbow of life, for want of a less cheesy way of putting it, but the sort of the ups, the downs, the colors, the flavors, like the things that make life rich. We just sort of numb ourselves to that because it takes a certain amount of emotional energy to kind of connect to life in that way.
Oh yeah.
So you're waking at like 6:45. And then you'll get, what times do you have to get up to then be ready for work on time?
Not for a while after that. So it depends, but I'd say on average, editing days tend to be 10 to 6.
Yeah.
So
and that's from home or from an office?
These days, it's more from home than anywhere else.
Right.
So I'm not really having to sort of start doing anything until 8:30. So there's a good hour and a half where I might just be lying there with my eyes shut, just thinking, oh, I'll just try to keep resting.
Yeah.
But nothing really is very happening, and probably get up feeling a bit worse than if I'd maybe just got up straight away.
Yeah, and the reality is also that what you're doing is you're giving your body rest that isn't really rest. And actually, you probably would do better to get up and then be more physically tired when it comes to bedtime, and then conk out because you're so tired.
Yeah.
And I think that there is, obviously if someone's got, chronic fatigue type issues, it's a different, I'm just saying because of my audience that's important, right? That's a different point. But in an instance like this, where there isn't, which I know might not be true to your story, but in my perception, there isn't an underlying health issue here that we need to be concerned about in that way. I would say that actually what's more important is you dictating to your body your bedtime and get up time, not kind of being a slave to not sleeping and then getting up later, because then you just end up in this slightly numbed state in a sense. And 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever, of meditation is going to be more restorative to your body than that time sort of lying in bed, sort of not really properly resting.
Yeah.
So I think there is a place here for installing a little bit of discipline, and you're not someone that lacks self-discipline. It's just the ability to apply it in the right place.
Yeah.
But I think you've definitely got some habits in a sense that have formed, and we can see why they formed because of, being wired in your system, sensitive to the environment, the tinnitus that's been happening, and then not sleeping, and then feeling a bit fed up and demotivated, and not so we can see how that's happened.
Yeah.
But I think having a more proactive focus to it has the potential to make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm sure. And the other really bad habit is just scrolling on my phone. Also the other thing that can happen is I wake at more like 3:30 or 4, and again I have to go to the toilet, and I will get back to sleep after waking up at that time, but sometimes I'll feel pretty awake and know that if I put my head straight back down I won't sleep, so I'll get on my phone for like half an hour in the middle of the night and then go back to sleep, which I'm sure is very damaging as well.
How much physical activity and exercise are you doing?
Very little compared to what I was used to, because partly because I've had a bad lower back since May, so I was a regular jogger, and I had to just stop doing that because jogging's pretty bad for it's a high impact. And then cycling, I kind of massively cut down the amount of cycling I was doing, because my cycle, again, because of where I live, my cycle is not only a bit too far, but it's not very pleasant. So for a couple of reasons, that just my physical exercise has just gone way down.
And how about things like, either doing a kind of stationary bike or doing, particularly if you've got lower back pain, things like Pilates, which actually will build the core and actually potentially help the problem?
Yeah, well, see, this is the ridiculous thing, because where I live, there's a gym that I can use for free. There's also
there's probably Pilates classes as well.
There's a yoga studio that have I don't know if they've got Pilates, but they've got several types of yoga going on.
They probably have got Pilates as well. They'll certainly have something that's helpful in your instance.
Well, I emailed them. So I did start to put in motion some things which I hoped would kickstart both of those things, the gym and the yoga or whatever it would be. So I messaged them, the gym, and I was like, I've got these issues. Like, do you think seeing a PT would be good for the lower back? And they were like, yeah, we've got some people who specialize. They will get back to you. So I'm just waiting for them to get back to me now.
When was that you contacted them?
That was a while ago. So I think I need to chase them now. And then I also emailed the yoga studio and I said, I've got these issues. And their response was just really annoying. But I understand it, because they were like,
they were arse covering.
Yeah, they were like, oh, we can't advise you on that.
I get it.
And I was like, yeah, no, sorry, I wasn't asking for medical advice. I was just asking what's good for lower back. That's all. Like, I've been to my GP, I've had an X-ray. It's all, not asking you to be. I
would just pick a basically suitable class and turn up and tell the instructor.
Yeah. But it's interesting you said Pilates, because someone else, I think, said Pilates. Is that...
Well, Pilates...
not putting you on the spot.
No, I mean, the origin of Pilates, as I understand it, is it developed out of the methodology for working with back issues.
Okay.
So particularly what you're doing in Pilates is you're strengthening the core muscles.
Yeah.
And often it's the weakening of the core muscles which then causes the injuries that people experience.
Yeah.
So I'm no expert, but generally speaking, if someone has got lower back or back issues, Pilates is a better fit than yoga, which sometimes can put additional strains.
Yeah.
But if you go to any qualified, competent qualified yoga teacher and you explain that you've got some issues, lower back issues, they will just give you modifications in the class and you'll be fine. So that's part of their training. That's how they become a qualified teacher, is to understand these things and say, well, actually, if you've got a lower back issue, when we do this pose, do this or don't do this. And it's their job to do the best they can to keep you safe. So you see, one of the best things you can do for sleep is physical exercise, because particularly the way things are in lockdown world is people can literally barely do more than, I know that if I work from home and I don't do any kind of exercise, I will do less than 7,000 steps in the day. If I'm out in the country and, doing normal life and maybe go for a walk with the kids, I'm doing over double that. I'm doing more like 15,000 steps in a day. And it's like that sedentary life. I know that if I don't leave the house for a day, I don't do any kind of exercise, I'll be tired at bedtime, but I won't be body tired. I want to go to bed and go to sleep, but I won't get the deep sleep that I get if I've actually done proper movement in my body. So we can get in a bad rut where we're tired and we're a bit numb and we're a bit brain dead. We don't feel like doing anything. And actually the thing that's going to break us out of that is more activity and more movement. Also meditation tends to be much easier if we've moved our body and we've kind of got everything flowing, and then we can sit and land. Otherwise we can sit to meditate and we're still sort of in our head because our body's not ultimately being moved. So I think what you need is more discipline in terms of bedtime and waking up time, getting up. Are you a morning or evening or lunchtime exercise person historically?
I probably lunchtime, if anything, lunchtime or evening.
So I would see if you can find some sort of Pilates or yoga, and if you can't find a class, find an online thing. And if you're going to do online, probably focus more Pilates than yoga because you haven't got that personal instruction. But I would build at least 5 days a week some sort of meaningful activity exercise into what you're doing. I think that will also help with the anxiety because there's different frames one can use to understand anxiety, but two of the frames we could use, the first one of which is where attention goes, attention goes, energy flows. You end up just all the energy in your head. So the more you think, the more energy goes to your head, the more you think, and you think your way more and more into that state of anxiety. So just moving your body will ground some of that energy from your head. Another way of looking at it is that from a biochemical perspective, anxiety is cortisol, adrenaline, and various other stress hormones being too high. And there is literally hundreds, if not thousands, of research studies that show the positive impact of exercise and movement in lowering cortisol and lowering stress hormones. So you can't, in an instance like yours, where your body is basically fit and well, you can't just think your way out of a state of anxiety. You also need to move your body to help support that. And if you're not, I am just not a morning exercise person, and there are very, very few things would get me to exercise in the morning. But I find after work, if I don't do some kind of movement, I don't decompress in the same way. And so it's not so much imposing a rigid structure on your body that doesn't work, but it is figuring out what does work for my body and being diligent and disciplined in installing that as a set of habits and routines.
I think what makes it a challenge is the sort of permanent state of exhaustion. It's just like, and that's sort of, even though I've been in a pretty much permanent state of exhaustion for years, I at least used to relish at the exercise part of my day, and I would really enjoy it. Whereas recently, and it might be a bit of a vicious cycle in that the less I've done, the less I feel like doing, and to the point where it's like, if I get, again, once my days are so sort of full, but when I get to the point where there isn't anything scheduled, I'm so tired that the thought of like then making my body do something else is just difficult.
No, I get that. And I would say, I think it is a vicious circle. And I think you probably have an element of anxiety-induced depression. Not that I'm diagnosing you as depressed, because I don't think you necessarily are, but I think the constant ruminating and worrying and anxiety is very energy depleting and draining as well. And I think there's rarely is there one single thing that breaks us out of the cycles that you're in. It's normally we need to work on the physical movement piece, we need to work on the thought piece, we need to work on the calming of your nervous system with the kind of meditation piece, we need to work on the triggers that put you. So there's all these different pieces of that jigsaw, but they are all important ultimately. And I think a lot of energy goes in to maintaining the anxiety. If we can take some of that energy and apply it to changing the anxiety, yes, it takes a certain push in the short term, but after a while, it's actually energy giving, not energy draining.
Yeah.
Anyone that's been in a situation where they had, for example, a health scare, like a genuine health scare that, and I know that you've had a few, the relief that they feel when they get the all clear, and then they might be exhausted for a day or two, but then like the whole new lift of energy that happens, because of the health anxiety pattern, you're living in that depleted state all of the time, and it's exhausting. And the calming of that and the breaking of that pattern will release a lot of energy that's currently being wasted.
Yeah. And there may not be an answer to this, but is there a sort of average, just because maybe it will help me to have a goal in mind, but an average sort of, I don't know, amount of time in terms of weeks or months, but from the point where you do start regularly, putting these things in place to when you might start to notice?
Yeah,
some kind of
it varies obviously from person to person.
Yeah,
but
of
kind of rules of thumb. Most people will notice some sort of initial benefit within a week to a month. You already experienced in 2 or 3 days of doing meditation that at the end of the meditation you felt a bit calmer. If you built upon that and you built that out as a pattern, you can see that homeostatic balance I was talking about earlier would start to reduce and would start to come down. At a month to 3 months, I think most people will notice a more stabilized shift. So initially it's like you're still at the same homeostatic balance, but you can come out of it for a bit and feel a bit calm when you go back to it. 1 to 3 months, I think what often happens is you actually start to shift that foundation and shift that balance.
Okay.
But I think that there is to build a new habit, it generally takes 28 days. There's different research, but probably fairly consistent 28 days. And that's because you do something enough times and you just sort of become familiar with doing it. So it takes more energy to get a car from stationary to 10 miles an hour than it does from 10 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour. So like if a car breaks down and we need to push it to get it started, it takes a few people to get the car going. Once it's moving, one person can keep it going. So the hardest thing is getting started. Getting started, also there's few things more motivating than noticing a difference. So initially it's often, I don't know if it's going to work. I'm fed up. I've tried so many things. I can't really be bothered. And it takes a certain amount of grit and grunt to just go, right, I said I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. But then if we start to see some benefit, it's like, well, actually, I can sort of see that's a bit better.
Exactly.
And then that becomes, you need motivation to make something happen from nothing. But once something's happening, that becomes the motivation. And then if you go off track, you've still got that reference point to go back and go, okay, it's really hard. I ran out of motivation, but I can see that I did this thing that helped a little bit. And then sometimes we need to have a bit of a strong conversation with ourselves, or we talk about it, and then you get things back on track. Rarely is it a neat and tidy, perfect path. It takes discipline, but you don't lack discipline. Like we were talking about it as on our last session, on the first session, around when it comes to things like money, when it comes to things like your work, you're a disciplined person. There are plenty of people which are irresponsible and reckless around money that have no discipline around it. From what I understand, that's an area you have got discipline. But it's about applying that discipline to this part of your life.
Yeah, sure.
What gets in the way of you doing that? So part of what we've talked about so far is there's a somewhat, you didn't use this word, but what I'm sort of hearing, a kind of apathetic state that you can get to where it's a bit like, nothing's going to work and I'm not sure I can be bothered, I don't have the energy. So that's definitely a piece that I think can get in the way. What else historically has been an obstacle to you committing and following through to something?
I think it's maybe part of it is I can be impulsive, and I'm very social, so I can end up with my days being sort of just full, and to the point where, again, like I said, it's to the point where when I get finally home or whatever and have my own time, I the only thing I've got the energy to do is to sort of watch TV.
Yeah.
That's a big issue.
So you overcommit in your social life.
Yeah.
My guess of why you probably do that, I might be wrong, but my guess is that it's partly an avoidance distraction, like just be busy so you don't have to sort of sit with the anxiety. Is that right? Or
if it is, that's not a conscious process. And actually, I think I said this to Oliver and Rachel after my last session, but actually part of it is a bit of a hang up from having been bullied, I think, in that there's still this part of me that when I get someone, invites me to something or whatever it is, like, do you want to go for dinner or do you want to go see a film or da, 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 da. So there's two things going on. One is like, I'm sort of still flattered. I'm like, oh wow, someone wants my company. That I was sort of shown at a very formative age that I wasn't worth anything, and but now I'm being invited to something. It's like it's like that's lovely, and I don't feel like I've been able to move on from the point where I'm sort of surprised by that still. The other thing is, like, I don't like disappointing people. I don't like saying no. And I feel if someone's asked me to spend time with them, by saying no, it's both disappointing them, but it's maybe they won't ask me again.
Right. Which is kind of part two of the same issue in some ways.
So those things are going on a quite a conscious level.
Yeah.
So there may be the subconscious avoidance thing going on, possibly, but
there's actually a conscious pattern.
Really, and then often, in my head, again on a conscious level, I'm thinking, oh, I'd really just like to go home, and be on my own,
Well, the reality is, to say yes to you have to say no to other people.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, because if you're not saying no to other people, in a sense, your life is dictated by how many invitations you get to go off and do stuff that you vaguely would like to do, in a sense.
Yeah, and I think actually there is an avoidance element to it, because if someone gives me, this is quite conscious as well, someone's like, oh, what are you doing X night, and I look at my calendar, there's nothing there, and they give me a plan of something to, okay, right, now I have a plan, I don't have to plan anything. That's definitely going on, because, and I think that speaks to how my mother used to be such a dictator in my life,
right? And
she really made my schedule on a day-to-day basis. And then suddenly, when she was gone, I really struggled to kind of, and I think this is all related to not being able to prioritize self-care, whereas I can prioritize things that are like work and hard. And because my mother was like that on my behalf. So like accepting whatever offer comes my way, I'm like, okay, great. I don't need to worry about that. It's not that it's avoiding, but it's more like, I don't need to worry about that. That's that portion of time taken care of, doing something nice and with a friend, so.
But say more about the not being able to prioritize self-care.
I mean, I suppose the idea of saying no to a social arrangement to instead go home and maybe meditate or go to the gym, it's just in my head under the category of boring. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I haven't felt the reality of those things being a real force for pleasure or gain yet. And that's the goal, I guess, is to have that shift in my own feelings around those things, those activities.
And how many evenings a week on average are you out, do you think?
Oh God. I mean,
not necessarily out, just out, like seeing people doing stuff.
I find it really hard to even answer that question, because I've, maybe that'd be a good thing to just catalog, because that's a simple thing to do.
That would be a good thing to do.
But I mean, on average, 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's rare to have an evening where I'm just like, oh, nothing after work. Because like I said, I'm social. I'm in a band. I've got friends that I see regularly.
Yeah.
There's my family who, we're all very close. So it's like, there just is stuff that kind of
I get it.
fills the time.
The challenge is that, you're grappling with some unpleasant and difficult inner material that needs attention.
Yeah.
Like, your nervous system has been, trained in the wrong way, and it needs retraining. Your mind has been trained some unhelpful patterns, needs retraining. And that is an investment of time and energy to do that.
Yeah.
Also, for your system to settle, it needs to have an absence of stimulation.
Yeah.
And constantly going out, seeing this person, doing this, doing that, is a constant stimulation into your system.
Yeah.
And I think what's important about this is, and I don't mean this in any sort of judgmental way, but is, in a sense, you can't have your cake and eat it. And what I mean by that is, you can't get the changes that you want to make without making a commitment to make those changes.
Yeah.
It's not so much about sacrifice and compromise, because I think ultimately making those changes will make you happier. So it's not like you have to give up your fun or your joy or happiness to do it.
Yeah.
I think you'll enjoy the rest of your life so much more that actually it will be more than worth the investment.
Yeah.
But you do have to make that commitment and make that investment to make it happen.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually hopefully quite helpful to make it a really explicit conversation and decision, as opposed to something that just you kind of meander into, and sort of, you're out here, you're doing this, you're doing that. Oh, I haven't really got the time. And then when you have a night at home, if I was out 5 nights a week, I don't think I'd want to do meditate. I just want to, your brain just wants to rest. It doesn't want to have to have to effort. So I don't think the issue here is so much about an absence of discipline to do these things. I think it's a bit about that. I think it's more about an absence of discipline towards the prioritization of your self-care.
Yeah.
And the prioritization of your self-care is partly looking at your diary and going, I'm already out 3 nights this week.
Yeah.
Actually, that's my limit, and I'm not going to say yes to that other thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of my problems stem from not being able to say no.
Right.
It's
but you can say no.
Yeah.
You're just not choosing to say no in the areas that you need to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's things you must say no to all the time. Like, the whole job of editing is basically saying, I sometimes call editing killing your babies, because it's like you come up with something and you decide it's not good enough and you scrap it.
Yeah.
You say no to all kinds of things financially that you could say yes to. So you know how to say no.
Yeah.
But you're not saying it in the place
to certain
you need
things
to.
I'm bad at saying no to.
Yeah. I really hear what you're saying about the history and about the impact of the bullying. And that may well be something that's really valuable for us to explore in a deeper way at some point in the work we do together.
Yeah.
But I think to go down that rabbit hole right now could be a distraction from what we need to focus on to start with, which is being almost a bit more heavy-handed with yourself and just putting in place what you need to, overriding some of that resistance. And then in time, we can inquire and explore more into the essence of some of that resistance. But I think if we go down that rabbit hole now, we'll spend another, a few months doing that, but nothing's really changing. And I feel like for you to be able to fully commit to this journey, you're going to need some wins along the way, early wins, let's say, to help fuel that commitment. Like, as we were saying earlier, there's nothing more motivating than like realizing that you're making progress and things are changing.
Yeah.
And I'm heartened to hear that the 2 or 3 meditations you did, because you could be saying, I sat down and my anxiety got worse. Doesn't happen for most people, but it does happen for a few people.
Yeah.
But you clearly did feel a little bit of a calming. We need more of that.
Yeah. Oh, it was particularly mostly the first one, I think. I think maybe the second and third I did struggle a bit more with. I was like, getting fidgety and restless. But the first one I was just like, oh my God, just like, just that chance to like not do anything. And, it was almost like a gift,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we need, I think, for the next few weeks is an action plan that you feel you can commit to. That is a stretch, but a manageable stretch.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What might that, I think it needs to include some exercise. I think it needs to include some meditation, and it needs to include some time to go deeper into the reset program.
Yeah.
What do you think would be manageable in terms of commitment to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the exercise is manageable. I need to go back to the gym and just chase them and just book a Pilates class as well.
Yeah. And if it's, if there isn't something suitable on site, we're in London. I mean, there's so many places you can go for something.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to, meditate, get that going every day. Like you said, perhaps that time in the morning, if I keep waking early, just to do it then.
I think you'll find if you're out 5 nights a week anyway, you're already failing.
Yeah.
Because you're only home, you're only going to get twice a week in as it is.
Yeah.
And on those evenings, I get it. So I think for you, morning probably is better.
Yeah.
And even if it's only 10 minutes, it's enough to sort of at least begin that process.
Yeah.
Probably, given if you're waking up and you're a bit groggy, probably it's between having breakfast and starting work. So maybe it's the last thing you do before you go to your desk and you start working. So you give yourself as much time as you can to sort of to acclimatize to the day and sort of wake up a little bit, rather than doing it in that sort of semi-groggy kind of state.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think it would be great if you could do 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, of the meditation. And if you do weekends, that's a bonus. But at least you have that sort of 5 days a week.
Yeah.
That you could get some sort of exercise in at least 2 or 3 times a week, and that might be a formalized class a couple of times a week. It might be something online. It might just be doing, even if it's just doing some stretching, but it's just at least getting some movement happening in your body. I'd also like you to go to module 3 on the reset program, which I think will help with the other piece of the homework around the trying to there's a kind of generalized sense of anxiety, but what are the actual thoughts? I think it'll give you a bit more specificity in terms of that. We can also unpack that a bit more together as well. I think it's not what often the cycle or the process is. Initially people go, I recognize I have anxiety, and then it's, I recognize I have those anxiety thoughts, and then it's, I can see those examples. Earlier today I was doing it, and then I can see I'm doing it right now. I can see I'm doing it right now, and actually I'm empowered to stop it. So there's a kind of journey of depth of insight, and it's kind of normal the stage you're at, that it's like, it's there, but there's not really enough clarity yet to do something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But I do think that this next few weeks is important, because I think it's about you showing to you that you are committed to the process. And it doesn't mean it has to go perfectly. I'm a realist in terms of course, you fall off the wagon a few times, and it's like, but it's about, because there's nothing that I can do to give you motivation. I can ask you questions and I can point things in a certain direction, but that willingness and that commitment has to come from you. The trick to it, I think, is to turn in a sense, the numbness sort of slight shutdown response, to turn that on a bit into more of a frustration, irritated, annoyed. And that becomes the initial motivation. It's not a very healthy long-term motivation, but just being fed up with the state of things is often a good place from which to get started.
Yeah.
And I think you are fed up with it.
Oh,
I mean, that's why you're here.
Yeah.
Any questions you've got?
Don't think so.
Okay. Do the best you can.
Yeah.
It's not about perfection, but it's about, in a sense, exercising your will in your commitment to yourself. And in a sense, this whole subject of self-care, it is an act of self-care to commit the time to yourself. And when there's been a history of that not being in place, just the very act of that alone is part of the healing process of that.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Good. All right, I will see you in a few weeks.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. I think this issue around motivation is so challenging for so many people. And the thing to remember is the hardest thing is getting started. It takes a lot more power to get a car from stationary to 10 miles an hour than it does from 10 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour. That's why if a car breaks down, it needs 3-4 people to push it, and then one person can keep the momentum going. Same is true when it comes to making changes in our lives. We have to work out our discipline muscle, and sometimes that muscle is a bit flimsy, but if we start to use it, and we start to get skillful at disciplining ourselves to do the things that we know are going to make our life better, make our life easier, it then gets easier to do so. I'd love to hear in the comments below the video what you find helps you with motivation. What helps you break habits? What helps you get on the right path and follow through? Do share in the comments below. Next week, we're going to be catching up with Katie. It's the first time you've heard from Katie in a while. So if you've been wondering how she's doing, come and join us next week.